I love you, Tears of the Kingdom. It's so hard to believe that we waited 5 years for this game to come out, and it's already been out for a week. And in that week, I have made such little progress in the game, but that's okay. Oh my gosh, everybody, Tears of the Kingdom, I'm loving it so much. I'm loving it so much, and that is what we are going to talk about today, 1 week with Tears of the Kingdom and my first impressions. But hi everybody, my name is Alex, aka Quality, and welcome back to the channel. Basically a Zelda channel, given my last few videos, so, you know, we'll have non-Zelda content soon again, I promise. But there's gonna be a lot of Zelda stuff. So this video is gonna be kind of rambly. I'm kind of recording this amidst a really busy week, but I really wanted to get my first thoughts about the game out there. I've been playing it a lot, not as much as I would have liked to this week, but again, it's been a busy week. Overall though, my thoughts on Tears of the Kingdom are generally pretty darn positive. There's a lot of good going on in this game, and I'm so excited. As I said, this is gonna be all over the place. I also wanna say this is going to be spoiler-free. We're going to talk about things that have already been announced by Nintendo, like the specific abilities that you kind of get in the game, as well as just some early game stuff. So don't worry if you're looking to go in completely not knowing anything, this isn't going to harm that. This is just giving you my thoughts about what we've seen so far. So first thing I want to address goes to the big question of, is Tears of the Kingdom just Breath of the Wild DLC? This has been a concern ever since it was kind of announced that it was going to be a direct sequel, and some of the screenshots we kind of saw some really familiar things. There wasn't too much different, minus a few small things which we'll get to. And I'm happy to report that no, it is absolutely in no way just DLC. And everybody needs to stop saying that, because this game is huge. This game is absolutely huge, and there is so much content in it. I think one of the best things about Tears of the Kingdom so far is that it combines so much of the things that I personally loved about Breath of the Wild and then expands upon it. And makes it this huge, big world that is actually feels connected with one another. So you have a lot of the same familiar sights, familiar faces that were seen in Breath of the Wild. However, how they're reintroduced in Tears of the Kingdom is just incredible. Like, I've gone to places that I knew like the back of my hand in Breath of the Wild, and I'm like, where am I? What is going on? Because there is so much different. It's very evident that time has passed since Breath of the Wild. I don't know how much. That hasn't really been established, but I'm wondering if maybe we'll get like an established time frame, but a lot has changed. A lot has changed in the Hyrule that you know from Breath of the Wild. And that doesn't even include the sky and now the depths, which are two other explorable areas in the game. The depths being the area under Hyrule, and the sky being the sky. Both also feature a ton of new stuff to do up there too, and also both have their very own distinctive kind of feel to them. Where Breath of the Wild, I know a lot of people complained about how it was just very open, very empty. You don't have that in the world of Tears of the Kingdom. You can tell that the world is starting to rebuild itself after the events of Breath of the Wild, and it just feels a lot more interconnected with one another. Not only that, but it just adds a different sphere to the whole world. So you have 3 very distinctive places to explore throughout the game, with lots to do. Lots to do. We'll get to the people later because that's a big point that I want to touch on, but there's so much to do in all 3 of those worlds. And aside from just exploring, if you're someone who isn't super into the exploring aspects of Breath of the Wild, there's still a lot of side quests to do as well. A lot of the side quests really give you good rewards from what I've noticed. Like, there's a lot. You have some familiar items making a return, such as, you know, fan favorite costumes and stuff like that, but you also have a bunch of new stuff with a bunch of really helpful abilities that, had they been around in Breath of the Wild, I think it would have kind of negated a lot of the explorative aspects of Breath of the Wild, but in Tears of the Kingdom, they kind of help you get around a little bit easier. Without spoiling anything, a lot of them help you get around a lot easier and navigate the world, so that way if you're kind of like, you know, I don't want to be traversing this world again, it's a little bit easier for you. So I think that's really, really cool. So not only that, but going to the people, which this was one of my personal biggest complaints with Breath of the Wild, is it's a huge world, there's a lot to see, but the people aren't adding much to it. And if you've watched some of my other videos, you know that I'm somebody who is very into the connection of characters and how they play into the story and how they play into the world. Because I think having a surplus of characters that are interesting and have you do things and talk to you and blah, 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 adds so much to the world. Like, they give the world life. And Tears of the Kingdom absolutely does that. It fixes that problem quite a bit in my opinion. The world feels a lot more connected, partly because society is rebuilding itself. You see a lot more people popping up in different areas. Yeah, you have your constant travelers like you did in Breath of the Wild, but you have more clusters of people. In fact, one of the first places you go to once you get down into the main area of Hyrule is a new, like, bustling kind of town area, which is really interesting because you didn't have that in Breath of the Wild. Like, the closest thing you would have is checking your way to Kakariko Village, which is also still there. All of those same towns are still there and are completely different, meaning there's so much more to explore in all those familiar places. But it just seems so much more connected. The characters talk about events going on in the world and how they relate to other characters and how they've seen things that Link might be interested in. It adds so much to the game for me that every time I talk to an NPC, I get really excited because I'm like, what are they gonna tell me? Is it gonna be a quest? Like, what's going on? And it's just really, really interesting, and it has something that Breath of the Wild just did not fulfill for me. So that's been a huge plus already. And because we're talking about the early game, let's talk about like the starting area. So for the beginning of it, it is very similar to how Breath of the Wild plays out. However, you are in the sky. It's kind of a similar format, which I was kind of like, I think maybe they could have done a little bit more to spice it up. However, because you're not in Hyrule, you're in the sky, that's how you kind of get introduced into the game. Is you have your opening that takes place underneath Hyrule Castle, so you're kind of exploring the depths, and then you immediately go up to the sky, and that is your next location, which is a total whiplash in terms of location, which again goes back to what I was saying of each place is so distinctive in what they are. But that opening area, there's so much new stuff outside of the trials that you have to do to get your new ability, similar to Breath of the Wild. There's so much to do and see. And the Great Sky Island, which is what it's called, it doesn't feel as limited as the Great Plateau. I don't know if that's just the feeling of it because it's up in the sky, but it just doesn't feel as restrained as the Great Plateau. Like, I remember exploring the Great Plateau was incredible. I was like, what, is this the game? Like, this whole area is just the game? Because that's a lot. But after a while in subsequent playthroughs, it kind of started to just feel like, it's not as expansive as I think it is. But with the sky and the Great Sky Island, not only does it not feel like a slog to explore, but it just feels so much more open. Like, there's so much more possibility for everything that can go on. And it's exciting. It's really, really exciting. It's a very exciting introduction to the game. Not only do you get all of the new abilities, which we'll talk about in a second, but you also get exposed to all of the Zonai devices and stuff like that, and how this whole world in the sky has kind of existed and what it was like. Because I feel like the sky is more comparable to Breath of the Wild Hyrule, where it is a little bit more desolate, but you still have constructs, little robots that honestly remind me of the robots from Battle from Bikini Bottom. I don't know, they're just really similar in I think how they're shaped. But so you have them kind of filling you in on like what the Great Sky Island was like in its heyday. It has very Laputa Castle in the Sky vibes too, which is one of my favorite Studio Ghibli movies, just FYI. And it was incredible. You get introduced to a really interesting character right off the bat, who again, I won't spoil, but is voiced by the wonderful Chris Hackney, who also voiced Dimitri, so that made me really happy. And there's just so much to do in the tutorial area and so much to see that I think, as somebody who played Breath of the Wild, the formula itself might seem reused, but you're seeing so much new stuff that it remains exciting. Whereas for newcomers maybe to the series, it's like mind-boggling how much you can do. It's absolutely mind-boggling. So let's talk about Link's new abilities. So the Sheikah abilities of Breath of the Wild are gone. I think all Sheikah technology disappeared after the calamity happened, so now it makes room for all of these new things that function very similarly to those kinds of things in Breath of the Wild, like towers, shrines, etc. Whereas your abilities are both helpful in similar ways, but also completely different and have to really make you think on how to use them. So you have several different abilities, such as the Ultra Hand, which I thought was a nice little jab by Nintendo by naming something the Ultra Hand, which allows you to pick up items put them together, stick them together, and all of that kind of stuff. It's kind of like your magnesis almost, but it doesn't only work on metallic items and stuff like that. You're able to pick up whatever. It offers a whole lot of interesting combinations of things that you can do. And along a similar vein is the fuse ability, but this involves weapons. So say you have a sword and say you have a bokoblin arm. You fuse them together, you now have like a 22 durability crazy sword thing, and it's ridiculous. It's so funny. And I know some people were kind of like, this is kind of a cheap way of like not getting rid of durability on weapons, which I think is a fair criticism. Like, weapon durability is not a function that works for everybody. Like, it's absolutely annoying in some ways. I'm enjoying it a lot more in Tears of the Kingdom because of the amount of combinations I can make using between fused weapons. Because not only do you get kind of a funny conglomeration of a bunch of stuff, but it does also increase durability or give your weapons different effects depending on what you fuse together, which I think is really creative because they really had to think of, all right, what's gonna happen if we put this together? I also love that it works for arrows as well. So rather than buying fire arrows, you're making your own, as well as bomb arrows. One thing I will say, a big RIP to the remote bomb function. I miss you so dearly. That is one that I wish they would have kept back, because rather than having the remote bomb where you just have bombs at your disposal, you have to find bomb flowers, very similar to previous Zelda games, which is cool, but they're not very easily accessible. You mostly can only get them in the depths or other kind of cave-like areas, and it just, I don't know, I miss them. I miss being able to just throw bombs at things. Then you also have Ascend, which is an ability that I feel like I don't use to its full potential, where basically if you're standing somewhere and you have a flat roof above your head, you're able to just shoot right up and land right on top, which is so cool and so helpful, especially navigating through caves and mountains and stuff like that. But I always forget to use it. I always forget to use it because I'm so used to just climbing everywhere that it's like, oh yeah, I can just fuse myself up there. And then you also have one that a lot of people were so confused about when it was first shown in a trailer, which is the time reversal. I think it's just called reversal. I think it's just reversal, where you can stop the flow of time for a second, pick an item, and make it reverse its path of motion, which is so funny. It's so creative. Like, all of these are presented to you in shrines very similar to how things in Breath of the Wild were presented to you, but the puzzles that are used around these devices, they're so interesting. They're so interesting, especially reversal, because you really have to think, all right, what happens, what was the path that this item took to get here, and what's going to happen if I send it backwards? It's so cool. And you can of course use it in the field too to, you know, shoot a spike ball back at bokoblins that they hurl towards you and just say, haha, look, you got hit with your own weapon. And I love that. I think that's so fun. Speaking of that, shrines in this game, I love them so much more than the Breath of the Wild ones. I found a lot of Breath of the Wild shrines to be extremely tedious, whereas these ones feel actually creative for the most part. Yes, you have your fair share of easier ones that are just trying to teach you mechanics, or, you know, combat trials or shrine trials where the trial itself is to find the shrine. However, using these new mechanics is so creative because not only are they sometimes used by themselves, but they have to be used in tandem in order to find the correct solution. And I just think that's so cool. I think that's so cool. And I think these abilities mend well together better than the ones in Breath of the Wild did. So I think it's just, they're great. I really think they're just great. And now here's a question that a lot of people also might be asking. What is the story like? Again, one of the biggest complaints about Breath of the Wild was how lackluster the story was and how the story was only told by optional memories. And even though I haven't done a ton of the story yet, it seems like a lot of that has been fixed. There are still memories that you have to go and find, but rather than having them be the main plot, it's supplemental plot, which I think is really, really interesting because yes, you have Link's adventure as he goes around and does what he has to do basically in order to find Zelda once again. But these memories show Zelda's perspective of what happened to her, which I think is really, really interesting. So as you're going through the actual parts of the story quest, you're actually unlocking the story, like the bigger story, not just the individual tiny stories that go along with each divine beast or what have you. Actual story, which I am so happy about. It seems like it's going to be a much more cohesive story. I'm still too early to really tell, but that's the feeling I get. I know though if it doesn't, I'm going to be extremely disappointed. And yes, I have not done one yet, but there are in fact true dungeons in this game, and I'm so excited. I was so hoping that they would do a mix between shrines and dungeons, and not just like Divine Beast dungeons, but actual distinct dungeons. And from what I have seen, it seems like it's going to be that way. If it's not, don't tell me, I'll find out and be disappointed by myself. But it seems like that is the case. Now, some people have also said that they've noticed frame rate drops. I personally have not seen a lot. This kind of goes back to the Scarlet and Violet thing, but aside from Scarlet and Violet being problems with Scarlet and Violet the game, I think if anybody's experiencing any frame rate drops, it is probably the Switch this time, which I'm not gonna get into the whole like, we need new hardware conversation. The game is running fine for me, but just know that maybe if you have an older Switch, it might chug a little bit more. Mine is doing all right. Like, I have not really experienced anything, and it's nothing groundbreaking. It's nothing game breaking like Scarlet and Violet, so you don't have to worry about that. I actually haven't come across any glitches, though I know there have been some, as there are in games, you know, sometimes it just happens. Also, my final point. Crocs are back in the most hilarious way possible. You find them how you normally do. Of course, they brought that back over from Breath of the Wild. But you also can reunite friend Crocs. One Korok has a giant backpack on his back, and you have to find a way to get him to his friend at a little campsite, and I just think that's like the best feature. I think it's so cute. A little tedious because there's a lot of them, but you get 2 Korok seeds by doing that. It's adorable. It's adorable. I hope they make a plush of Backpack Korok, because it's way too cute and I need it. I really need it. In case you haven't noticed, I'm a pretty big Korok fan, so I need it. I think that might actually be it for some of my first thoughts, though. I know this was a really rambly video, but I had a lot to get off my chest. I've really been loving my time with this, and I really have not found that much that I dislike about it. Could the fact that it's a brand new game and we're still only a week in be really like affecting my opinion? Maybe a little bit, but I like to think I'm pretty level-headed with this kind of stuff, and especially because I haven't played the game the past few days, I've really been thinking about the things that I've really been enjoying as opposed to the things that like I haven't been. I really feel positively about this game, and I just can't wait to keep playing. As of right now, I do believe I like it better than Breath of the Wild. We'll see if that sticks. We'll see if that sticks, but it takes everything that I wanted from Breath of the Wild that it didn't deliver and makes it happen. It was really like Nintendo was listening to me when they made this game. And, you know, that's very personally validating, but also, I think it delivers in a lot of ways Breath of the Wild didn't, and it's going to make a lot of fans very, very, very happy. Both people who loved Breath of the Wild and people who maybe were kind of meh on Breath of the Wild. One thing I can say though, if you didn't like Breath of the Wild, I don't really think you're gonna like Tears of the Kingdom. At its core, it is still a sequel. A great sequel at that, but it's a sequel, so I wouldn't expect going from Breath of the Wild to Ocarina of Time Reborn, right? I think it's kind of a little silly to think that way. I love the Breath of the Wild format, but I also really do love traditional 3D Zelda format as well. And I hope that maybe we can get to a place where both can coexist, as well as 2D Zelda. I want all 3 of them. I want the Triforce of Zelda games. Breath of the Wild, like traditional 3D, 2D. Give them all to me. Give them all to me. I really don't think there's going to be enough if you disliked Breath of the Wild to make you like Tears of the Kingdom. I could be wrong, and please, if you're one of those people who didn't like Breath of the Wild but's really enjoying Tears of the Kingdom, please let me know. I want to know. But yeah, please let me know how you're feeling about Tears of the Kingdom. I know we've only gotten a week in, and there's still so much exploring and so much fun to be had, but I'd love to hear your early opinions as well. That was a really chaotic video, and I really hope you liked it. So if you did, maybe consider liking it, and if you're not subscribed to the channel, maybe consider subscribing to the channel. Again, I promise, we don't only do Zelda stuff. We do lots of other stuff, but Zelda's been on the mind, so that's been the content. But we have a whole bunch of other stuff coming up really, really soon. So yeah, I'd love to have you a part of this little YouTube family. But anyways, until next time, everyone, goodbye!